suppose I'll introduce myself. I've been in this space for about 5 years. I started as a journalist out of Toronto around 2014. Ended up writing about crypto for a bunch of different magazines. I think one of the first articles that I wrote was about a decentralized marketplace that Amir Taki created at a hackathon in Toronto. And that kind of that's a great symbol, a great example of the power of this technology. That ended up becoming OpenBazaar, which is now fairly well-designed, very smooth experience for trading assets freely on the internet. It hasn't really grown a whole lot. It hasn't really become like an eBay or an Amazon, for reasons we're going to be talking about as soon as we are ready here. But it does show the potential. And Bitcoin as a currency itself, as an asset, has certainly grown a lot over the past 10 years. What else? I came down here and lived in Acapulco for a while, and was involved in this community for a while. And these days I'm just kind of teaching people security and doing a lot of education and other such things. So, okay, I have control. I'm just going to get started. So let's talk about Bitcoin, the economics of security, custody, and inheritance. These are, I think, 3 topics that we really need to wrap our head around if we want to see the long-term vision of crypto really take hold. And that's because this is a multi-generational project, and there's certain aspects of security that I suspect we don't really understand deeply enough, and security is as important as any other topic, because no matter what you care about, no matter what you think is important, if you can't defend it, it doesn't really practically matter. So just for those that are feeling like the bear market, like it's crushing you, you're feeling like, oh, why does it matter, everything's like on the ground. Just want to remind you that we did this the past few years. So parabolic spike went from about $250 to $20,000 in about something like 2.5 years. And here's where we're at. This is the logarithmic chart, and this is the kind of movement that Bitcoin does. And so we might have another one, and that's part of the question of security. Right now, it might feel like it's not worth really putting time or thought or energy into figuring out the future, figuring out how to have a good position in the future, but you will once the price goes parabolic, and then you'll be freaking out if you don't just kind of think about it a little bit. Now, sovereignty is one of those words that I find convey a lot of what this space is about, what this conference is about, what libertarianism is about, what crypto is about, and that means being able to control your own wealth, being able to control your own body, your personhood, and having that freedom to act as you will, and also own the responsibility, own the consequences of that. You own your body, and you own the effects of your body, for better or for worse. And freedom is obviously something that we all care about, something that we all want, or at least you would assume so since you're in Acapulco. But freedom, unfortunately, is not free. Freedom is not free. If it was free, we would be there already, because why not, right? The problem is that you actually have to put some energy, you have to do something in order to get freedom and hold it. And so in order to illuminate that, I came up with a somewhat egotistical theorem called Galt's theorem. And I haven't done ayahuasca, so I definitely have an ego, and so that's what it's going to be called. So I just want to kind of like break down one of this problems in security that I think we need to illuminate. Starts like this: as long as there are people that are willing to steal, there will be a cost to protecting property rights. Say that again. As long as there are people that are willing to steal, there's going to be a cost to protecting property rights. Doesn't mean that they're capable of stealing. It's that they're willing to steal. And I'm not sure that there's anything such as perfect security, so the capability to steal might always be there. But it's the willingness that's really the problem. The word steal I'm using here is in an archetypal sense, so I mean all the moral crimes, all the hypocritical crimes, right? rape, murder, theft, assault, you name it. All of those are taking something from you against your will. And so it's fundamentally theft. This is a Mark Passio sort of concept, so to speak. Now, the intention to steal thus is the price of defending property. You could, in a sense, if you could measure the costs of securing property, you could then measure the intention to steal in some general loose sense of a given society. The moment that we reach a universe, a world where people are simply abiding by the NAP at all times, then you won't really need locks, you won't really need walls, you won't really need guns. Fundamentally, you won't need them because people will not violate that boundary. But as long as one person at least starts doing that, then now the price starts to rise for security a little bit. This problem, this fundamental problem, is the source of demand for security games. Security games such as security infrastructure, something like cryptocurrencies, like Bitcoin, like, again, doors and locks. And it is kind of like the gravitational well that drives a lot of things in society. That psychological experience of security or lack thereof, at the very least, but certainly the reality of it. This is, I think, also not controversial to say that it's the fundamental justification for the state, or at least one of the things that the state justifies itself on. And I think that's a really important aspect, because not just the state, but a lot of different games that we play, in politics, in companies, in corporations, and there's a lot of different ways that we try to deal with this problem, and crypto is only one of them. Another aspect is that force or violence actually is subject to the same economic principles as many other things. One of them being the economies of scale, or economics of scale. So I'm going to give you some examples. So Bitmain, those of you who are in crypto might know about Bitmain. Bitmain was an ASIC manufacturing company based in China. They were producing ASIC hardware or Bitcoin mining hardware at incredible rates, incredible speeds. Some of the best hardware came from them, and they had deals with chip manufacturers in China. They were outproducing everybody. Estimates say 80% of the mining hardware at the time was being produced by them, and so they had a huge advantage in the marketplace, right? And you might say, well, why is this, right? I mean, doesn't the free market achieve stable competition? Like, what's going on here? And so you might say, well, the government is helping them. Well, China's a technological powerhouse, this and that. Well, it's not really centralized, even though it's in China, but China's really big. This was a kind of an annoying problem, right? And I think the reason that they're so big is because they had this network effect, this economies of scale. They're producing at large scale, and that gave them an advantage that's larger than smaller scale operations. Another example might be crypto exchanges, right? Well, hang on. So if you see down at the bottom, elephants versus mice, turns out that if you compare the energy efficiency of mice and elephants are actually a lot more energy efficient from a consumption perspective. The amount of energy they take in and the amount of energy they put out is actually more. They put out more energy than mice, despite being like way bigger. And this is what I'm trying to talk about. Like the economies of scale let you produce more once if you produce at large quantities. And it's why Amazon is massive, why banks have such clout in society, because they centralize the cost of doing business and the cost of protecting your property from certain attacks, and then let you get the benefits. Obviously, they are in cahoots and capable of launching other attacks. I'm not advocating for centralization. I'm just simply trying to illuminate the problem and the reason that these things exist and hold ground so well. And I don't think governments are that different either, right? We think about the way that security games work, and if you're going to go to war with somebody else, and you both have 50% of the strength, and then somebody gains a little bit of ground, suddenly that advantage will probably go parabolic, because people are just not going to want to die for a losing battle. So people just flip to the majority, and then things stabilize for a while. This is also known as the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 principle, as popularized by Tim Ferriss. Is the same, fundamentally, it's the same thing. 20% of the things have 80% of the output, 4% of things, carry almost half of the output of whatever you define. Here's a quote from a 2016 academic research paper. For instance, the distribution of sizes of cities, earthquakes, solar flares, moon craters, wars, and people's personal fortunes all appear to follow power laws. It's a very, very important principle that I find not really comprehended or understood in general libertarian sort of thought. And maybe that's just because I'm, not getting exposed to it. Maybe I'm sure it's in there somewhere. So maybe politics, at their best rather than worst, are games to try to manage this power, manage this negative potential. Not just politics, but something like crypto. Again, we're trying to create security systems, security games to protect our wealth. What we're really doing is we're creating games to defend our wealth from attackers, and that's basically what I'm talking about. So, John Galt fans or other Shrug fans, again, I put this here because it's sort of relevant thematically to Anarchapulco, to this speech. Ayn Rand's work has had a huge amount of influence in not just libertarian sort of thought or crypto, but also the cyberpunk movement. From which Bitcoin came. And Anarchapulco probably would not be happening if it wasn't for Ayn Rand. This quote is the conceptual, it's the conceptual constitution, so to speak. And I know some people might not like that, me using that word, but it's the heart of a society that John Galt creates to separate themselves from a collapsing United States. And the idea here is that whoever abides by it is welcome to be part of this special sort of high security new community, and those who don't are not welcome. This is basically the NAP. I swear by my life and the life of others, and the love of it, that I will never live for the sake of another man nor ask another man to live for mine. It's basically the non-aggression principle. And whether you agree with this or not, I'm not exactly, I have my quibbles with it. The bottom line is, if you violated those principles in that story, you would not be welcome in God's Gulch. God's Gulch also had a security barrier. It had a electromagnetic shield around it that only those with the motor, the Galt motor, could enter. Anybody with a combustion engine could not enter, right? So even in that metaphor, which I hope you guys are familiar with, there was a protective barrier around this startup society. And that barrier was fundamental. It gave the Galt's Gulch camouflage, and it protected it from outsiders who did not have the key, which was the Galt motor, a motor that was, gathered energy from static electricity, and then it was basically an infinite electricity machine. And so, even in that example, we end up at a concept of what is good and what is wrong, what is worth defending and what is not, and then a mechanism to protect it. And so, this clearly is something important. Now, this is Nick Szabo, one of the most sort of influential crypto academics, right? He came up with the concept of smart contracts, and he gives a speech at DEF CON 1 where he talks about the history of blockchain. He points out that Ayn Rand and Friedrich Hayek were big philosophical influences in what was big gold and then became Bitcoin later on. So there's stuff here that's very profound and sort of built into these cryptocurrencies that comes from both these philosophers and certainly others before them. Problem is, we don't have an infinite electricity machine. We don't have a free energy machine. The moment that anybody thinks, like if any of you guys think that there's such a thing, come reach out to me and we'll start a mining operation. Make a ton of money. But in the meanwhile, it seems like we don't have that. And so what we gotta do, we gotta deal with the problem of scarcity, and that means we have to make careful sacrifices. We have to grab our chips and allocate them appropriately and hope for the best. And that means we gotta make proper sacrifices. This was kind of one of the conflicts that happened last couple of years with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, was about which was the proper sacrifice. Do we sacrifice network topology, or do we sacrifice block space on chain? That was the question, and that's why we had this conflict, because there was no solution that satisfied both. Okay, so let's talk about what proper sacrifices look like in the crypto world. Today we're in a cowboy model kind of security world, you know? We're all individuals, we all have our hardware wallets, we have maybe a backup at home, and then we carry a hardware wallet and a PIN code in our head, and we stand our own ground. We are sovereign individuals, so to speak. To a large degree, right? Or a reasonable degree, depending where you are and depending what games you're playing. This is where we're at. We're in the Cowboys gunslinger model. And that's fine, that's a fun place, I like it. It might look something like this. It's you, Treasure, your keys at home. Those wondering that the crypto steel thing is a steel backup case where you can put your master seed and protects it from fire damage, water damage, fall damage. A house can fall on it, it'll be fine. You can throw it off like multi-story buildings. It's a great little device. You can much put a lock on it too. So that's where we're at. And the sacrifices here is obviously there's a division of labor cost, right? You have to think about it. You can't just outsource the problem to somebody else. You gotta learn. There's a learning curve. You have to pay for a Treasure and a crypto steel and maybe a cool cowboy hat. And you have to deal with the inheritance problem yourself because if you get hit by a truck, nobody knows your private keys, right? Maybe. Or maybe you gotta share them with somebody, and now that's an important trust relationship. If something happens, you don't really have anybody to blame for the most part, as much as you might want to. And you are vulnerable to what's known as a wrench attack, or somewhat vulnerable, which is somebody just coming with a wrench and hitting you until you give them the password. In a reasonable, safe society, that's not a problem, but it depends what games you're playing. Custodians and centralized exchanges. This is obviously a very important solution, one that I personally don't like, and one that I would like to see decentralized. But even post-crypto, we have massive centralized exchanges with something like a quarter of all wealth in them, or crypto wealth in them, serving the same type of people, or at least sort of serving the same role, the same market demand that banks have served over the past memorable sort of history. And it looks something like this. There's people around it, there's a key in this exchange, this is the yellow circle. The exchange controls the hot wallet, and then there's a cold wallet behind it that's higher security. And this is so that if the crypto bank gets hacked, then they don't lose everything on the online service. And basically they're playing security games and distributing their risk, right? And so all of these people are sort of outsourcing the security to the exchange. This is more or less, this is one example, very simple example of how those security games work. The sacrifices here is individual freedom, transaction limits, privacy, sovereignty, political liberty, and these are all things that you're giving up in order to get convenience. Like legitimate convenience, you can sort of flip over to different currencies at any time at will, fairly fast, assuming everything else checks out, and you don't have to deal with the security risk. It's significant, obviously in the marketplace, there have been significant benefits, which is why we are where we are today. And you obviously have the risk of potentially fractional reserve. We don't know if these exchanges are fully backed. How do we know that? Many of them are unregulated, right? This is why we did something like they called proof of keys earlier in January to try to check their reserves, right? And that was by withdrawing the coins and see what happens. So we have inherited the same problems in a sense, and now we have to see if we can find a proper solution to some of these problems. And then there's consensus politics, right? Like if there's a fork, which fork is your exchange going to be on? And obviously you have the risk of scam or exit scam or bank heist. Now, here's something fun. Bitcoin actually is programmable. It actually is programmable. There's this meme that Bitcoin, you can't program Bitcoin, that you gotta go to Ethereum to program cryptocurrencies, that you gotta build a new shiny smart contracting platform. Depends on what you're trying to do. Bitcoin is actually fairly good at programmability. We can actually program Bitcoin fairly well, and that's gonna become more and more obvious as the Lightning Network sort of starts coming out in force in various apps, which some of are coming out already. And one of the things we can do is called the multi-signature accounts. Who here has heard of multi-signature accounts? Okay, so it's maybe a little bit over half the room. It's a fairly straightforward technology, right? You can have two different keys controlled by two different people and two different devices, for example. It's the simplest sort of scenario. And they both need to agree in order for the money to move. And this solves something that I'm just going to call the Mexican standoff problem. which is nobody wants to move because they're afraid that the other guy is going to act in a malicious way. And if you have two multi-sig, you either both play nice or nobody gets the money. And that's actually quite useful in very, very low trust environments, but it's also very expensive because you have to put up whatever goods you're trading, right? Let's say I'm selling you, shipping you some good worth $1,000, I have to put $1,000. Well, if you're gonna buy, you have to put $1,000 on the contract plus the $1,000 you're gonna pay me, and I, as the shipper, have to send you the $1,000 product and put $1,000 on the contract, so that none of us have an incentive to steal. We have zero incentive to steal because the collateral holds 100% of the value of the item. And so it's very expensive to do completely trustless trade. And that's one of the reasons these things have now become very popular, is because the less trust that there is, the more expensive it is to engage in trade, despite being able to send money across the world instantly, which is obviously a huge benefit now, right? So if you're dealing with digital products, it's a lot different. Sometimes it can be automated and a lot of this risk can be taken off. But for physical products, this remains somewhat of an issue. And we've solved it through reputation games and such things, and risk prevention, right? And insurance games and such. Another multi-sig account is 2 of 3. You know, HODL, a peer-to-peer exchange, sort of like similar to local Bitcoins, lets you do this. And two out of the 3 players can move the keys, and that's fine. And one of them in this case would be like the escrow company, so that would be HODL, and then you would be one, and then the buyer or seller would be the other. And this way you can trade coins for fiat, fiat for coins, coins for coins, you name it, you can do this with escrow. And it's a fairly stable structure. It's a 2 of 3 is fairly stable structure, very popular security structure in crypto that's, you know, we're starting to get decentralized, right? Next up is Casa HODL. This has been a very innovative model of multi-signature, which is becoming, you know, popular. This is a very hot company. They have an excellent team, a very competent team, and I'm very excited about it. The design is great, and what they're doing is it's sort of like a premier security solution where they say, okay, well, you're going to have 5 keys, let's say 5 treasures, right? One of them is going to be at your bank, another one maybe at your office, another one at your home, and another one of the keys actually is going to be on your phone. So you actually have, maybe you don't have 5 treasures, you can have 5 treasures if you want. The point is you have one on your phone, one on your home, and then 2 other keys at the bank and at your office, and then Casa HODL holds one of the keys as part of their service offering. Why? Because in the terrible, unlikely but possible scenario that a tsunami takes out 2 of your keys, let's say your home and your office, then you have another key in your phone, and then Casa has 1 key, and then you can get the 3rd one at the bank. That would be a really bad case scenario. And so the reason this works is because it's a 3 of 5 multi-sig, or I should have said that earlier. This is a 3 of 5 key multi-sig, right? So it looks something a little bit like this, like the side, the circle on the left, right? That would be you in the middle, and then there's 4 keys around. Well, you have 5 keys, but then somebody else has access to the 5th key. That would be another way to do it, right? And I think that's a really great solution, because not only are you not trusting anybody else that much, right? Even if you are sort of giving 1 out of 5 keys to somebody else, you are decentralizing yourself to a great degree. You, at any given time, you don't have all of your crypto on you in one password in your head or something like that. You have 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 3 keys, and now there's 3 other locations that have to be breached in order for theft to occur, right? So this is, I think, the future of custody for those interested in sovereignty. Going forward, it's a great model, and this is a great company. The problem is they charge about $10,000 a year. So it's complicated, right? It's kind of like a whale service right now, even though they do want to scale and let sort of lower the prices eventually. So this is a concept that I think could actually work, and it's basically the same thing that we're talking about, a 3 of 5 multi-sig. But instead of you giving 1 key to a company, a third-party company, which is going to charge you some money, and maybe I'm sure that's worth it. Like if I had that kind of money, I might actually be with Casa, but I'm not that rich. And here, maybe if you have a friend that's nerdy enough and competent enough and high integrity enough to your judgment, then maybe they can be your 5th key. And maybe you can be their 5th key. And now we're building decentralized security societies, central security games, right? And obviously, maybe you can imagine how this could turn into a fairly, rich webs of security, perhaps, right? The reality is, like, for example, in my family, like, nobody knows as much about crypto in my family than I do, right? And in your family, it's probably the same. You probably are the expert of crypto in your family, right? And to teach your mom the security games that you have learned might be a little bit unreasonable. The same for your wife, the same for your children, maybe, right? And so distribution of labor as far as competence on security, knowing, being good at security or reasonable security, is actually like a legitimate thing. The principles of economics of distribution of labor also apply to security. And so how do we optimize for the security assumptions that we live in our context, in our environment? This may be one of the possibilities. And the way that it will work, again, 2 or 3 out of 5, and you can move the money type of thing. You just distribute them in various safe locations, up to your convenience. You can play with it a lot. So, what are some of the problems with, if you want to do this yourself, what are some of the problems? Well, you gotta have an emergency plan. So, let's say S hits the fan, what do? Right? How do you actually move the money? Do you move it to another multi-sig? Do you move it to a centralized wallet? Do you move it to one Trezor, right? You might have to have another 3 or 5 multi-sig that's empty, waiting to move it there, right? Depending again on what games you're playing. And so it's important that you actually think through the emergency scenarios and think about how, maybe that person that you're sort of building a kind of like security alliance with, how they're gonna play with that and what your responsibilities, obligations are and such. How are you going to communicate this information? Because you actually have to communicate this pre-signed transaction somehow and pass them on to the next person. And so, by what channels are you going to do this? How do you authenticate that you send it to the right person? There's not a whole lot of security cost, and like you could pre-sign with one key, post it on Twitter, and then grab it from the other house and pre-sign it and stuff. But maybe this is something that needs to be thought about, and I think that's one of the services that Casa sort of optimizes for. What about a false flag? What if somebody is pretending that an emergency happened, right? Oh, I really need to move my money right now. Please sign the transaction. You might want to have a scenario, like a solution to that. You might want to say, no, sorry. I don't care how bad you think it is. We're gonna have to wait 2 weeks and give me a call on Zoom, and I want to see your face, right? Like, whoops, technical difficulty there. But basically, in a false flag scenario, the person that would be the emergency contact that has the other key would know to maybe call the some sort of security service, or maybe the FBI, or just call the cops, or get people to your house type of thing, because emergency, like you never should have to be like, oh my god, I really need the money right now, right? Like, this is a sort of HODL wallet type of thing. So you can build scenarios like that. It really depends on your threat model. It really depends on how concerned you are, like where you are in the world, right? Some countries are a lot safer than others, and so it'll really depend on your judgment of the state of the security of yourself. And then definitely you want to find some high trust nerdy friends, right? Because if they're not high trust, and if they don't have the competence to deal with the technical side of things, then they might not be reliable. But on top of that, there's like you kind of have to find people that are good under pressure, that work well under pressure. Because one of the challenges with inheritance is that people might be emotionally vulnerable and unstable if they are family members or close friends, and something terrible just happened to you, right? They might be really kind of shaken by it, and so that's an important thing to think about, to consider when choosing who your emergency contact is. And it doesn't mean that it can't be your friends or your family, but it just has to be somebody that can handle high stress situations and think clearly. And that's important. Last but not least, you can play with time. You can actually play with time in Bitcoin. You can create contracts that are locked in time in a certain way, and this can actually may be the way that crypto inheritance goes in the medium future. I think time locks or sort of dead man switches. There's potential here, but it requires a lot of R&D and development and testing, and we're not there yet. But this is the kind of stuff that that is possible with Bitcoin, and it would be trustless, and it would be very reliable. But there's a lot of implementation questions and human processes questions around it. However, it is technology that is being used, and for people that are like interested in building, this is something that's very important. So here's an example of how it's being used today. How you can play with time with Bitcoin. 112 Bitcoin, and this is an example of a time lock contract that I think will hopefully kind of inspire some of your curiosity here. And it's an escrow with timeout. So if 2 out of 3 people in a multi-sig sign, then the money can move. Otherwise, Alice can move all the money herself after a 30-day waiting period. That's a time lock smart contract escrow, and it's a smart contract by the popular meaning of the word, but these aren't very smart contracts. This is fairly low intelligence contract. In fact, most crypto smart contracts are actually quite dumb. But nonetheless, potentially very, very useful, and this is the kind of technology that's being used in the Lightning Network at a much, much larger scale. And it looks something like this. So Alice has an hour after 30 days. The time is sort of added or counted in time blocks, Bitcoin blocks. So a lot of this is coming through the Lightning Network. Little pump time. Lightning is the future. Check it out. Go to hashtag Lightning Network, and you'll see a lot of little cool toys. Here's some of the things that are coming out. So these are like Lightning nodes, very shiny boxes. Samurai Wallet has one. Casa has one. Nodal is also a node, which basically hosts in the Lightning node and lets you do a bunch of cool stuff, so that you don't have to trust a third party to at least sort of host the node, do the accounting for you, and you can actually do this yourself. If you're interested in sovereignty, this is the kind of technology that you should be interested in, I think. Wallet of Satoshi, great Lightning Network wallet, and check it out. And then there's also now a Lightning chess app that you can play chess and bet against other people while playing chess. So some of this stuff is coming out. Okay, so if you guys want to learn how to do multi-sig, like actually implement multi-sig practically, we're doing a workshop on the 16th at 2 p.m. And I want people to actually play with this, start thinking about it. I want us to have deeper conversations about where it's useful, where multi-sig is useful, some of these sort of programmable tools are useful. And so that's what my workshop's about. I'm teaching you what I know, what I've learned, and then hopefully we can start a community and engage this more. Bring a laptop, bring a hardware wallet. That's on the 16th at 2 p.m. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about inheritance. So again, what happens to your crypto if you get hit by a truck? It's gone, right? And for most people, I would assume that the money is probably gone. Nobody knows the password, nobody knows how to get to it, and that's probably not what you want. What you probably want is that wealth to be transmitted maybe to your family, to your children, maybe to a charity that you like, maybe to some project that you're a fan of, right? And that's not an arbitrary problem. It's really not a simple problem. If you get hit by a truck, for most people it's game over. But I don't think it has to be. If it is, there is deflation, right? That's at least there's that, right? Like your coins will never be accessible again, so everybody's money goes up a little bit in value. That's cool. But maybe that's not what you want. Maybe you want to have more. You have control of where that wealth goes instead of giving it out to all of us. And I guess that's okay. So why? Well, maybe you want to do that. I wanted to kind of like try to sell you on why you should think about this, but I kind of feel like it's pretty obvious. So obviously you can benefit your heirs, you can lessen the tragedy, right? So another reason to care about inheritance is that if something does happen to you, and you are the sole, the money maker in the house, then not only is it a problem for your family, but now they have to deal with A, trying to find your crypto, or B, they have to fight over the assets in the house, right? Because you haven't written a proper will, so maybe there's a legal battle. So inheritance is not just like finding a crypto solution, but like actually writing a will and going through the legal process of setting up a proper estate. And this can lessen the tragedy in an emergency situation. One of the problems with crypto is that even if you find a technical solution that's good, the law might disagree with your right to use it. And so it's important that you basically layer solutions. So you have a crypto solution, and then you have a legal solution on top, and now that might actually work, and then you have to, you have to really kind of think about it. So how do you set up a crypto estate? Well, here's three simple things to think about. Legally binding will, a map to your treasury, right? So maybe you have a legally binding will and you think you have a technical solution, but nobody knows how to implement a technical solution. Nobody knows where your treasure is, nobody knows where your treasure is, right? So you actually have to like do some proper accounting, right? Maybe they find the treasure to get the Bitcoin, but there's 20 other altcoins in it, and how does anybody know what's in it? And so it's really important to actually have clear accounting. One of the common mistakes that people make is they like try to obfuscate the name of their holdings, right? They come up with like some cryptic name for their wallet or some cryptic name for their accounting sheet. And it's like, not only are you probably gonna forget, but if something like this happens, nobody's gonna figure it out. And it doesn't matter because just listing your assets in a private accounting sheet does not give anybody the private keys. You can have a secure key distribution and publicly say that you're rich, and it's probably not a good idea to do that, right? But it's not the worst to have good accounting, and that can be held reasonably private, reasonably securely, and can save you and other people quite a bit of trouble, depending on the situation. Obviously, you need a technical solution, and again, this is not arbitrary. There's some solutions that are interesting. People have talked about using smart contracts to sort of solve this problem, right? Dead man switches and such. They're obviously very immature still and complicated, but there is very good analog solutions that you can use to do your inheritance. Let's say that something does happen to you. What happens to your exchange accounts? All the crypto in your exchanges? I don't know. Maybe you're gonna have to call them. Maybe somebody's gonna have to call them and hustle them and sue them, and right? So, especially if nobody has your password, right? How do they prove that you are the person that you say you are? How do they prove that you are the family owner of the family member of that person, right? Maybe the son, right, or the daughter. So I found a reasonable solution, technical solution to get started. It's not something that's going to solve all your problems. It's certainly not going to solve the legal issues, and it's certainly not advice, right? Simply a solution that I found, and we're going to be working, talking about it more at the workshop I'll be doing. But in the meantime, or despite it, or do it anyway, get Pamela Morgan's book. It's called Crypto Asset Inheritance Planning. Paperback, Kindle, audiobook. She is the leading expert in inheritance. She will take you through a journey that you will learn a ton by the end of it. There's a lot of details in accounting and how you think about this problem, and she does an excellent job at answering this question with the current technology, and it'll, it definitely is going to take some learning curve, it's going to take some time, some energy, you're going to have to, invest some money in it, but that's part of the opportunity here, right? The day that all this stuff becomes easy is the day that we'll be at the moon, and that's when you sell. So, okay, so it's time to pump what I'm up to. Like I said, I got a workshop coming up. It's not just going to teach you multi-sig, it's going to teach you what I've learned about how to protect your digital assets, your exchange account, social media, protect yourself from, getting your Facebook hacked and then hackers scamming all your friends, right? That's happened before. Just basically raise your security walls, make it more expensive to get attacked, and more make your experience of the internet easier, right? One of the problems that's often happens is your own mistakes get you in trouble. And so, I'm kind of sharing a strategy that I've put together to simplify your digital security experience and enjoy using the internet. It'll actually make your enjoyment of the internet higher because there'll be more flow and you'll have more security, less stress. I also do consulting, right? So, if you want on-demand crypto tech support, I can help you. I can tell you what I think. And you are your own man, you're responsible for your own decisions. And so people that join the workshop, I'll get you in a private group and we can maybe sort of move this conversation forward and update the strategy going forward and stuff. So I think we can create a community of sovereign individuals that are interested in this kind of lifestyle. And hands-on experience. I also got this analog 3-factor authentication thing. So I've been doing this for a long time. I attach my phone and my wallet to myself because, let's face it, we're all Androids. We're all half robots now, so let's embrace it. You can do it with your phone as well. So with your wallet, you can touch your wallet yourself, so it's harder to lose. You get up from a cab or something, your shit doesn't fall off your pockets, right? It'll save you a lot of trouble, a lot of pain, right? If you lose your phone, it's a big deal, not just from security, but it's like $600 you gotta recoup, right? So I got some fun designs for tethering your things to yourself. And yeah, I hope you'll join me. Like, if anybody's interested in actually building some of these solutions at scale, building some companies, building some serious products around security, reach out to me. We may be able to become rich and legendary. Who doesn't want that? And that's it. You can check out my stuff at uibank.info. Again, speech workshop is on February 16th at 2 p.m. This stage, I believe, or maybe stage B. And I'm at juangal.com and Juan is Gal on Twitter. Thank you for being here.